I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 27th. Folks, I wonder if I can just ask for quiet in the room, please, so we can start the meeting. We have a very modest agenda this morning so that we will be able to complete the agenda rather quickly, so you may want to entertain conversations and meetings a little bit later on. So welcome to meeting number 27 of the Economic Development Committee. I'd like to welcome all of our members of the committee and other members who may be here. I see no other non-committee members here at the moment, but they may be here. And also welcome the public that's here with us this morning. For those of us that are in the room with us, the screen at the back to my right provides real-time updates concerning where we are on the agenda and what item is coming up next. And for those of you who are home, you can follow us, follow the agenda on and debate on your computer, tablet, and or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. The Economic Development Committee gratefully acknowledges its meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation and the Haudenosaunee, as well as the Wendat, and they've been home to many diverse Indigenous people here in this land. Are there any declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I'd like to ask for confirmation of the minutes of the January 18 meeting. Okay, Councillor Kelly, let's see first. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We have a few speakers and presenters this morning. Madam Chair? Yeah, well, two. Presenter is Benjamin Tell. So, okay. We will start off then, members, with item ED 27.1. It's an economic outlook. Mr. Benjamin Toll, Deputy Chief Economist for CIBC World Markets Inc. is here, and he's no stranger to this committee, and he will be here speaking to you shortly. So I'll hold that particular item. ED 27.2, Economic Development and Culture 2017 Annual Report. We're holding that for presentation by the GM. ED 27.3, Business Improvement Area BIA's 2018 Operating Budget Report number 3. Let's say, members, Councillor Fragadakis, there's moving. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. ED 27.4, appointments to Business Improvement Area Board of Management. Councillor Hart, moving adoption. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. ED 27.5, City of Toronto's Canada 150 celebration. We have a presentation on this item. I'll hold that down. ED 27.6, Redefining Public Arts in Toronto. We have a speaker. Dr. Sarah Diamond is here. We have a communication from Councillor Cressy, so we'll hold that item down. We should do this now. Okay, that's right. Okay. ED, because that's other business, yeah. ED 27.7, that's the Toronto Economic Bulletin. Okay, Councillor Fragadakis is moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Members, we have an additional item of new business to be added to the agenda. It is titled Toronto Film, Television, Digital Media Board. It's a decision letter from the board. Do members have copies of this? Okay, members' copies are being distributed. Additionally, there is a correspondence from Councillor Fletcher titled Options for Film Studio Infrastructure Report. I have spoken with the general manager. He's in support of the letter, and there is a corresponding recommendation. I know that that is associated with the correspondence from Councillor Fletcher. General manager was already working on this, so this is rather helpful and instructive with respect to the communication from Councillor Fletcher. So I'd like to add this to the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried, and give members an opportunity to review the correspondence as well as the decision letter from the film board. Okay, so we are now moving to item number 1, and I'd like to ask Mr. Benjamin Tall, Deputy Chief Economist at CIBC World Markets, Inc., to come forward. He is no stranger to this committee. We are always delighted to have Mr. Tall here. He is very informative. He's a world-renowned expert in the field of economics, and we are always delighted to have you here. So good morning, Mr. Tall, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I don't have much time and so much to discuss, so I'll go through this presentation very, very quickly. So please pay attention. Because, 2017 was a great year, and not only for Toronto, but for the global economy, and us being a global city, we are feeling the impact of a very strong economic growth globally. As you can see, this chart is what we call the surprise index. Basically, to what extent global economies surprise on the upside, namely relative to what people expected, what we got. And you can see that everywhere, with the exception, by the way, of the US, everywhere we have seen economic growth globally better than expected by a lot in 2017. And leading the way, by the way, is Canada. 1.2 percentage point extra economic growth. And that's why, yesterday the budget was balanced, or 2 days ago, because we got extra, not balanced, but basically did not go up, the deficit, simply because of the fact that we got extra $3–4 billion, extra money, gravy, just because of the increase, unexpected increase in economic growth. So that's actually something that the government definitely will take and use, and that's what we have seen, and we have seen it everywhere. The question is why the global economy is doing so wonderfully, and the short answer is easy money. When you have the Central Bank of Japan with negative interest rates, and they are printing money, that's something. When you have the Central Bank in the Eurozone, negative interest rates, and they are printing money, you go to Denmark, you ask for a mortgage, the bank pays you. So we have a situation in which you have a lot of momentum in the system, a lot of energy in the system, and if you generate enough wind, even pigs can fly. And that's exactly what we are seeing. That's exactly what we are seeing. This is a mirage. This is all about low interest rates, and the question is, to what extent that will change? The mini correction that we got in the stock market 2 weeks ago was all about the market starting to tweet about the possibility of interest rates rising. So that's a window to how much we are sensitive to the risk of higher interest rates, with major implications for a city like Toronto. By the way, in Canada, it could have been even better, because the change in Canada was a lot about energy. I was in Alberta just the other day. I was in a coffee shop. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. But I'm almost positive that I saw somebody actually smiling there. Things are moving in the right direction in Alberta. Oil prices improved from 40 to 60. But relative to what it used to be, 100, it's much less. So the swing in 2017 was because of energy, but it was in an environment of energy prices at 40, 50, as opposed to 100. Basically, what I'm telling you, it could have been better. It could have been much better. Actually, what I'm telling you is that, as opposed to what Scotiabank is telling you, you're not richer than you think. But we will take it. We will take it, because that's a good surprise. The question is, to what extent it's sustainable? To what extent it's sustainable? And I believe that 2017 is the peak of the cycle. You look at what the market did, and that's very interesting. Every 2 minutes, the market upgraded expectations in 2017 because we got good numbers. But when we did 2017 and we felt better about 2017, we also upgraded 2018. Why? I'm not sure. So what I'm telling you here is that maybe the market is a bit too optimistic about to what extent the economy can continue to grow. 2017 was a wonderful year. And now the market is expecting 2018 to be even better. I'm not so sure, especially when we get some, as you can see from this chart, some indications that the global economy is starting to slow down. So maybe the market is a bit too optimistic about 2018, but that's not the story. The story, very important as far as interest rates are concerned and the city, is where we are in the cycle. Listen, this has been, as you can see, a very long cycle. In 2 months, it's going to be the second longest expansion ever. And the only one that will be longer was the one in the 1990s, where we benefited from the internet revolution that lifted economic growth. So this is a very old cycle. So people are talking already about a late cycle behavior. Basically, the recession is over there. And I say, not so sure. Maybe this cycle is younger than it looks. Why? Because what counts is not how long the journey is, but how much you accumulate, what you achieve during that journey. And if you look at overall GDP growth that was accumulated since the recovery started, nothing to write home about. So this is not the 9th inning. This is maybe the 5th, 6th inning of this game, because the recovery was muted. Yes, it was long, but it was muted. And as you can see from this chart, nothing to write home about. It's not something that we haven't seen before. So I think that this recovery still has legs, can continue to go without a recession. Eventually, there will be a recession, but I'm saying it's not next year or even not in 2019, just because of the fact that we did not accumulate a lot of GDP, which is a good thing. Now, very, very important. All this, and our city is operating in this environment. This is the economic reality that we are facing. Namely, the potential growth of the economy is slowing down. The ability of the economy to grow is slowing down. And we know why. What used to be speed limit of, let's say, 4% is now 2%. That's extremely important. Why? Number one, demographics. When you have people getting older, and people are getting older in North America, in Europe, in Japan, less people are participating in the labor market, so the potential growth of the economy, the speed limit, is actually slowing down. It's all about demographics. And Trump can do many things, but Trump cannot make America young again. This he cannot do. So what I'm telling you here is that the speed limit of the economy is being compromised. The ability of the economy to grow is being compromised by the demographic story, which means that when interest rates rise, they will rise very little. Namely, the next peak will be much less than the previous peak, just because of the slowing in the potential growth of the economy. So the next aspect of this is demographics plus productivity. That's what counts here. So the only way to lift our standard of living, the only way to lift the speed limit of the economy is productivity. And I wish I had time to get into it, but I'm convinced that with right policies, we are on the verge of a significant boost in productivity. All the statistical bureaus are telling us that we are not productive. We are less productive than we were 10, 15 years ago. And I say, how is it possible with this wave of innovation, we are all less productive? I really don't think that we can measure it. We see a lot of small frontier companies in Toronto, that their productivity is rising much faster than anything else. So we can measure it, and I believe that the only issue is diffusion of information. Namely, those frontier companies are not talking to the rest of us. If that's the case, it's a very optimistic way of looking at the future, because it means that only with time or right policy, this information will be shared, and we will we'll see another wave of productivity. It can be artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, whatever it is. We are on the verge of another wave that might lift this line and will enhance our ability to grow without inflation and therefore without higher interest rates. Very, very important. I see the city, I see the province, I see Ottawa playing a significant role in enhancing productivity, because that's the only way to improve our standard of living. The demographic story is very, very predictable. Quickly, let's talk Trump. Now, listen, I was not trading Trump until recently. Trump was a blip when it comes to financial markets. Trump was unable to change the market. You know, after the elections, the US dollar went up, and 2 minutes after it started to go down. Now it's below what it was before the elections. The consensus for economic growth in the US before the elections was 2.1%. Now it is 2.1, a blip. Even the interest rates, they went up dramatically after the elections, and then they started to go down. The only reason why they are still higher is because the Fed in the US is moving, nothing to do with Trump. And, you know, and the stock market, until 2 weeks ago, he was tweeting and saying, it's all about me. And no, because the US stock market went up, but also the German stock market went up, Japanese stock market went up, emerging markets went up. It's a universal story, nothing to do with Trump. So I believe that when it comes to markets, Trump was not a force. But that's changing. The ability of Congress to change the tax package or the tax policies in the US is huge. Very significant. A city like Toronto cannot underestimate the impact on our city, clearly on Canada. This is huge. Tax rates are going down, and that's very, very significant in the US. They are going down in a big way. Now, why is it important? Because until now, all OECD countries, with the exception of the US, have been cutting corporate tax rates. It has been going down and down and down and down. The US was flat at 34%. Now they're down to 20, which is more or less where we are, even lower. Which means that, like that, we lost our ability to compete through tax. In addition, in the US now, you invest in a new facility, 100% of this investment you can write off immediately. An accelerated depreciation schedule. This is huge in terms of cash flow. Now you can repatriate. You can get money out of the US with very low tax. That's $2.6 trillion of money that will be coming to tax to stock buybacks and dividends. And of course, as you know, in the US there is no global warming. We have global warming. So our companies pay for carbon, they don't. That's a major issue. And by the way, if you're a CEO of a Canadian company and you are trying to make a decision, Canada versus the US, you have all those issues. And in addition, if you do it in Canada, you are not sure if you will be able to ship tomorrow your goods to the US because of NAFTA. So we are facing major issues, and we have to react to it. We cannot pretend that nothing is happening, because this is a significant change that will impact the city of Toronto, will impact manufacturing, and something that we have to wake up. We had a budget that did not respond to it. I hope that the next budget will respond to it, because we are starting to lose time. Because if you're a CEO trying to make a decision, Canada versus the US, unfortunately at this point, the decision will be the US. And I would like to change it. Policy is the right way to do it, and we have to respond, because this is not vacuum. This is not business as usual. This is a significant change in the US. We have to recognize that. In this environment, we also have to recognize what we are doing in terms of the issue that Trump is trying to deal with and whether or not he will succeed. The main issue, and I will go to the previous chart, and I think I could just go like that. Yeah. That's the main issue that we are facing. Very, very important. Toronto is seeing it. Other people are seeing it. This is the previous chart before that. I suggest that the reasons, one of the most important reasons, and that's important to understand, why this expansion is so long, and why the stock market has been going forever, and why interest rates haven't been rising, is the following. In a normal cycle, over the past 50 years, what happens is the following. The labor market is on fire, the unemployment rate goes down, then you have wages rising because the unemployment rate is down, the bargaining power of labor goes up. Wages go up, inflation goes up. Inflation goes up, interest rates go up. Interest rates go up, the economy goes down, and then you have a cycle. That's what we have seen this over the past 56 years. That's the cycle. Something is broken this time, because the labor market, at least the headline numbers, is on fire. You know, in the US, in Canada, you know, we get all those numbers. The labor market is great, the unemployment rate is down, but then you look at wages. Until very recently, they haven't been rising at all. Even now, they're not even close to where they should be, given where the labor market is. So something is broken. And when you don't have wages rising, you don't have inflation, and that's why interest rates are so low, and that's why the economy continues to go, because nothing is killing it. Now, and that's why the stock market went up. Now, the question is why wages are not rising. Very, very quickly, I think that something is broken in the labor market, with major implications for a city like ours. Because I see a mismatch in the labor market. I see people without jobs, and I see jobs without people. I see people looking for jobs they cannot find, and I see companies looking for people they cannot find. You know that many small businesses are telling us they cannot find people. So we have this mismatch that is really breaking the wage equation, and Economics 101 is not working anymore everywhere. And the issue is that you look at the US. The unemployment rate is very low. The headline numbers are great. But you look deeper, and you can see that not all is well in the US labor market. The number of people collecting disability insurance is larger than the number of production workers in the US. You have more people collecting disability insurance than production workers. The duration of unemployment, how long people are unemployed, is rising. The quality of employment is going down. Namely, not all is well. Many people are not even participating in the labor market. They gave up. That's their cry. And Trump is the messenger. So you see, the reasons why the expansion is so long and the equity market is going up and interest rates are not rising is the same reason why Trump is the president today. And I think it will be naive to believe that we in Canada are immune to this trend. We are not. The quality of employment in Canada is going down. The number of people making below average wage is rising, and the income gap is widening. And I wish I had more time to get into it, but I believe that the number one issue is clearly education. From a short-term perspective, this problem simply does not have a solution. You cannot take a manufacturer worker and make this person a computer engineer overnight. It's not going to happen. So those people in Michigan, they will be waiting. For every job we lost to trade, we lost 8 to automation. You cannot change that. So that will take a while. But during this while, we have to rethink education. I believe that we, as a society, we are failing young Canadians. I do believe so. I think that the field of study, what people are studying today, not very relevant to what's happening outside. The labor market is changing at the speed of light, and the education system is behaving like nothing happened. You know, we tell people, go to STEM, you know, science, technology, mathematics, engineering. And for the first time, young Canadians are listening to us, and the enrollment rate in those fields rising. Wonderful. Guess what? Tuition has risen 40% faster on those fields than others. And I say the opposite should be the case. We should subsidize them. We should help young Canadians because we are failing them. Not only we have a baby boomers that, baby boomers not retiring, so we have a bottleneck. Not only we have the most expensive real estate market in generations, and now also the labor market is not flexible enough. I'm talking about changing the way we think about education. I'm talking about break the negative stigma associated with colleges. I believe you need something like universities, colleges, 1 degree, 1 tuition, something, you know, we tell people, study what you love. Say, fine, but also study something relevant. And then you can combine a system that gives you both. You can have a BA in history and a minor in plumbing. In Germany, it's not a joke. In Germany, that's the reality. In Sweden, that's the reality. We have to rethink education because young Canadians are failing, and we are failing them in terms of their ability to participate in the labor market to the extent that they can, because we have extremely talented, innovative, creative, energetic, young generation. We just need to help them, and the system has to change. That's basically Trump, that's Brexit, and to an extent, this situation is happening in Canada. You can see all the jobs created in the OECD, including Canada, over the past 10 years were created in the higher end of the market, of the labor market, and the lower end of the market. Middle class going down. So the demise of the middle class is not just a political slogan. It's economic reality. And we have to wake up. Very, very quickly, let me say something about NAFTA, because that's important for a city like Toronto. And you know what? The trade deficit in the US is mostly with China. And you can see that this is the yellow line. And the US is saying we need to narrow our trade deficit. Fine, but I say if you have to narrow it, why don't you deal with the yellow part as opposed to the NAFTA part, which is a very small part? Because I think that in many ways, Trump needs China as much as China needs Trump. You see, I think that when you impose a 45% tariff on China as he promised, what does it mean? It means that prices in Walmart are rising. That's a de facto tax on low-income Americans, your base. Not going to happen. The fastest growing segment of the global economy today is the consumer of emerging markets. You want to, and the future of North American manufacturing is that consumer. The consumer of emerging markets is the future of North American manufacturing. Do you really want to start a trade war and reduce access to them? that will cost you dearly in terms of future revenues, and Germany will be more than happy to take over. And of course, you have the North Korea file, in its China on that. So I think that he cannot touch China now, so he's going after the little ones, that's us. And you look, 12% of the trade deficit is NAFTA. Within it, you need a microscope to find Canada. But I think that we should lose some sleep over NAFTA, because NAFTA is an issue. The Prime Minister is telling us negotiations are not going well. The Foreign Minister is telling us it's not going very well. We know that the most significant issues haven't been dealt with yet, and it's coming. I don't know what will happen. I really don't know. What I do know is that there will be this fog of uncertainty that eventually will have a negative impact. And the Bank of Canada is starting to tell you that that's something that is entering its psyche when they decide about interest rates. So I believe that you will see some impact on the value of the dollar. We are starting to see it. It's starting to go down. The Mexican peso will go down because of that. Until we get some sort of resolution, I don't know what will happen, but in between, you are a CEO of a Canadian company. You are thinking twice before investing because you don't know what will happen, what kind of tariff you will be facing. We need to find some sort of resolution to that, and then we can start rethink the situation. This is not healthy, and the longer it goes, the more difficult it is because we have this fog. So I'm very concerned about NAFTA. I think that we should really try to find a way to find a resolution. Very, very quickly, the Bank of Canada, facing the tax cuts in the US, facing NAFTA, and also facing a very significant increase in the ability of higher interest rates to impact the economy. Our sensitivity to higher rates as a society is much, much higher than it used to be. You know, we have a generation of Canadians that never experienced high or even rising interest rates. For them, those low interest rates, it's, you know, not so exciting. So low interest rates is the base, and now they go up. That's significant. And remember, we are much more sensitive than the US because during the recession, our debt-to-income ratio went up from 140 to 165. In the US, it went down from 165 to 140. So they deleveraged, we didn't. And now it's 171 in Canada. The debt-to-income ratio, 171. I think almost everybody in this country knows this number. It's all over the media. It's in the news. We are obsessed with this. I think it should be part of the citizenship test or something, because I do believe that that's the issue. So we have sensitivity to higher interest rates, and you can see every basis point counts. When the Bank of Canada goes, you feel it. So the bank is the first to tell you, maybe the disease is also the cure. Maybe the increased sensitivity to higher rates will prevent interest rates from rising. And therefore, I believe that the Bank of Canada will be moving very slowly, much more slowly than the Fed, with major implications for, let's say, the real estate market in Canada. Very, very important. Given that we are in Toronto, you must talk about real estate, because real estate is important. And the question is, are we in a bubble? We are not. What's happening here? Clearly, you can raise interest rates without raising interest rates. You are all aware of B20, the changes by OSFI to qualification rates. Now, if you take a 5-year mortgage, instead of qualifying at 3%, which is the rate, they're qualifying you at 5%, basically 200 basis points higher. That will reduce demand, or will impact demand by 12%. So that's significant. 12% of people will not qualify after this. This is, you can see, will reduce demand. Now, some of the winners here are actually alternative lenders. Basically, if you go to a bank and the bank says, listen, sorry, you're not qualifying, you go there. You go to what we call MICs, Mortgage Investment Corporations. They account now for 10% of the market, on its way to 15%, because their business is booming now, because many people go there. I don't like it, because what we are doing here, we are transferring risk from the regulated segment of the market to the unregulated segment of the market. We are transferring risk from where there is light to where it's dark. I don't think it's a smart thing to do. And I think that we have to be aware of the fact that, yes, we are trying to de-risk the market, but we are moving risk to where we cannot actually see anything. And we have to change regulations just to deal with that. Very, very quickly, are we in a bubble? And I think that when it comes to Toronto, the best view of the Toronto real estate horizon is actually from the Vancouver Harbor. Very, very quickly, that's Vancouver, and you can see that 2015 was a crazy year in Vancouver, where prices went up very, very, very quickly. In my opinion, most of it in 2015. Up to 2015, everything was normal. In 2015, something bad happened, speculations, flipping, that led to this, almost hockey stick type situation. And then the government, as you know, introduced a 15% tax on foreigners. Things slowed down even before that because of gravity. And I believe that the tax on foreigners was not really, foreign investment was not really the issue. It's what domestic buyers believe this tax will do. So it's really domestic buyers slowing down, expecting this tax to slow down. Now take Toronto, move it 14 miles to the left. That's Toronto. Exactly the same. Exactly the same. You can see that our bad year was 2016. We had a crazy year in 2016. I was able to explain maybe 10, maybe 11% activity, not 22. So again, I'm positive that in Toronto in 2016, up to the first quarter of 2017, was a lot of flipping, a lot of speculation happening, not healthy. The government, as you know, introduced the 16-plan real estate, 16-point real estate plan, and I can tell you that one of the issues that the market slowed down. Again, the 15% tax on foreign investors is part of it. But again, a lot of it was gravity more than anything else. As you can see in both cities, things improve because supply is the issue, not just demand. And now we're seeing some softening because of regulations. So that's more or less where we are. And my main issue with the changes is clearly rent control. I think that rent control is not something that will help the market. I think that rent control should be inflation +2 as opposed to just inflation. That will allow builders to build while protecting tenants. Unfortunately, it did not happen. This means that supply of rental activity will go down, and we are desperate to see that. This city needs more supply. You can see that density is rising wonderfully. That's exactly what the province would like to see. You can see a situation in which for every unit decline in low-rise, we have seen an increase in high-rise. So it's almost one-to-one. So the composition changed, not the number, and you are replacing an expensive unit, low-rise, with less expensive unit, high-rise, and that's exactly what we have seen. And in many ways, this composition change actually led to a situation in which prices did not rise as much as they could have risen because of the fact that you exchange again something that is expensive with something that is cheaper. Now, I do believe that we will slow down over the next year or two because of regulations and because of the fact that we reach a point where we are unaffordable. The low-rise segment of the market is already slowing down. You go to the 905 area, and you know what used to be 800,000 house, now it's 7, on its way to 650. The gap between the low-rise and the high-rise is actually shrinking, and eventually will reach an equilibrium. But I think that from a long-term perspective, we need a way to release the pressure. We know that immigration will go up, not down. We know that the speed at which land is being released under the Places to Grow Act is actually slowing down. And we know that population growth and demand actually will be faster than expected. So from a long-term perspective, the demand and supply story is not in equilibrium. And we don't have the rental market to release the pressure like in any other big city. With rent control, we will see a situation in which you will see less and less purpose-built, and the condo space cannot be the rental solution in a city like Toronto. So I believe that from a long-term perspective, I'm very concerned about Toronto being an affordable city, with major implications on labor force, immigration, and many other things. We have to find a way to make this city more affordable, and a big part of it is A, rethinking rent, and B, we have to look at ways to release more land, and of course, transportation is key. You know the story. So that's the way I see it. I think I'm a little bit too long, but that's the way I see the situation, if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Wow. 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 There's a lot there, and a lot for us to decipher and to sort out. Members, any question for Mr. Tall? Okay, so I'll start with Councillor Hart first, and then Councillor Vice Chair Holland. Councillor Hart, you may begin.
It was a great presentation, by the way. Just a quick question. You mentioned the Canadian economy is doing so well. All economies are doing so well. Why is the TSE so flat over the last 4 years if we're doing so well?
Yes, that's a very good question. And if you look at Canada, one of the issues was resources. We actually lost some ground on the energy. The health sector clearly is there. And if you see the high-tech sector, in every country, especially when it comes to the TSX, did very well. Our high-tech sector is very small relative to the share of the economy, you look at stuff like gold, where we are relatively high, did not go very. So it's the composition of our stock market. In many ways, our stock market is not representing very well representation of our economy. So the economy is doing well, but it's not really being translated to the stock market, absolutely.
And just a follow-up question, that would be why the Dow is doing so well, because that's more representative of companies like Amazon,
Exactly.
Google, et cetera.
You look at the high-tech sector, did extremely well. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hart. Councillor Holland?
Great, thank you so much. And I thought the one slide that I was looking at was slide 8 on the change in employment by skills. So obviously, we're seeing a lot of transformation within the ecosystem, the technology ecosystem with job transformation, AI, and we know that between 37 and 45% of jobs will be transformed in the next 5 years. So what is your recommendation on that? What's your feedback coming from CIBC, or what are you doing within CIBC even for your own staffing?
Yeah, I think that, again, I'm very concerned about it. I think if you ask me, what is the #1 issue facing Canada in the next 10 years? I would say this #1 issue will be a widening income gap. It's already wide, and it's widening. And we have to start realizing that things are, and it's being translated into the political arena. That's Brexit, that's Trump. There's no question about it. It's not people not liking Hillary. It's much deeper than that. So I'm very concerned about it. So I think that, in the short term, let's face it, in the short term, the elephant in the room is that this problem simply does not have a solution. You cannot fix it over the next 5 years. You simply can't. But you can fix it for the next wave or cohort of students that are now in school. And I say the #1 issue is rethinking education. So I'm talking about an umbrella-type degree, where now, like 20% of people going to colleges are coming from universities now, because they go and do their BA, MA, they get their student loan and debt, and then they have to find something practical. And I say, if you have a degree that combines colleges, universities together with one tuition, and if you have corporations part of it as far as co-op opportunities there, and if you have the government there, you can really generate a system like in Germany that really you don't have this kind of problem. And you break the negative stigma associated with trades, for example. It's not just computer engineers. We need electricians. We need plumbers. Good luck finding a plumber. So we need to work there as well. And it's doable. We know what to do because other people are doing it elsewhere. But we have to rethink the way we do education. Second is tuition. We have to make education more affordable, especially in those fields.
I think the province is doing that. So they're doing free tuition. I know in Sweden, they've completely transformed their educational system to gear it towards the innovation economy. So that would start actually in primary education. Yes. So from JK to 8 and then onwards. So even prior to getting at the university level, it's really important for the provincial.
Absolutely.
But that's more provincial. Obviously, we have no influence over that at all. But I hear what you're saying. But in terms of job transformation, that's more my question that I was asking you. What is CIBC? I know I've been to your innovation lab. What is CIBC doing in terms of its own employment? AI is going to have massive impact on job transformation, and that's post-education. So what would your recommendation be, or what is CIBC doing to address that?
I think that CIBC is actually more it's not about our workforce, because the transition there is much more slower, but clearly CIBC is big time into innovation, AI, and investing in it. But what I think the private sector should do, and CIBC is part of it and some others, is actually create pool of money to help startups.
So do you mean we have so much funding going into startups, and actually I would probably debate you on that, because it's not so much money that's going to startups, it's scaling up.
Exactly.
That's more of the issue. We have so much money going into startups. It's the focus now is scaling, which Canada's doing. But the bigger question that I was asking is, in terms of AI and the impact of job transformation with all of these new technologies, what is it? Do you mean a social contract? Should the provincial, federal government start looking at social safety nets in terms of, so if somebody doesn't have that skill set, or, I mean, even the federal budget mentioned 220,000 jobs that we have a vacancy for. 220,000 jobs that we have a vacancy for because we don't have that skill set here.
You see, I think that that's exactly it. So I think that if things don't change in a dramatic way, the way I see the labor market 10 years from now, let's face it, the labor market of today is the most exciting labor market ever. Think of it, from your basement, you can start your own company, you can deal with many countries, project by project, and the way we define a business will change. It's the most exciting labor market ever, but the wall that is protecting this paradise is getting higher and higher and higher, and you have to climb it. Some people will not be able to climb it. And I totally agree with you that if we don't change the way we think, we will have two societies, those who actually will subsidize the social safety net that the governments will provide. And it will happen, because not everybody can be a computer engineer. But if we can minimize this dependency by starting education very early, by funding startups and forward, I think we can at least have a chance to reduce this gap.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor Frakarakis.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I have like a million questions, but I'll limit them because in the interest of time and other people's presentations. But I wanted to get your perspective on where you think we are in the cycle. I mean, you said that the elephant in the room is that we have a problem for which we don't have a solution. So like, where does that place us in this larger picture where we have a widening income gap and a city that is on the verge of unaffordable if it isn't there already? And like, what does that mean for us trying to attract other companies to this city if their labor force can't actually live here?
Yes, so, and that's why I think that the tax aspect from Trump is very important, because all of a sudden the personal tax story is becoming an issue. People say, why would I come here and pay 54% tax while I pay much less in the US? So I'm a bit concerned about it. We need to be able to attract. Still, Toronto is a place people want to live in. Vancouver is a place people want to live in, and we are able to attract a lot of talent. But we shouldn't take it for granted. We should make it more attractive. And I'm not sure if new immigrants now are lining up to come to Toronto, given the cost of living and given the tax aspect. So we have to be aware of that and don't take it for granted that people will come regardless what happens, because that's not going to happen. So we have to wake up to this reality. I think that in the short term, things actually will not improve in any significant way, because, again, there is no solution to this. What's interesting is that there is a demographic aspect. If you are in your 20s now and your 30s, that's actually very unfortunate in a sense that the labor market is more difficult, because there is the baby boomers, there's a bottleneck. And baby boomers, remember, in the past, you reach 60, 61, 62, there's a party, you get a watch, and you say goodbye. Retirement now is not a date in a calendar. It's the fastest growing segment of the labor market in Canada today is age 55 and over. The fastest growing by far, 3 times faster than prime age. And that will continue. People are engaged, they are healthy, they don't want to retire. So that will take a while. So people retiring, eventually they will retire. Eventually there will be actually shortage of labor, because the next generation is not as large. And if you are in like high school now, or even, you will be fine, demographically speaking, but you need the skill as well. So I think that in the short term, I'm not extremely positive. The thing that can help us dramatically is productivity. If demographics is not helping you, we must invest in productivity. If we get another wave of productivity, you increase the ability of the economy to grow, so more people can participate without inflation, without higher interest rates, and then you have some sort of a solution. So we need to invest in productivity enhancing methods, and I think that Ottawa is a little bit behind the curve here, in my opinion.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frakarakis. Just a couple of questions for me. Benjamin, there's a report that's been prepared by Philip Bazell and Jack Mintz and Austin Thompson, which really speaks to the 2017 tax competitiveness, and you've addressed that somewhat. But they really, focus on the fact that unless we in Canada respond to the changes that are taking place in the U.S., and you talk a little bit about it, but the federal budget that was just passed didn't seem to really address that at all. I'm just wondering what would have caused them to miss that opportunity in terms of addressing this?
That's a difficult question, and maybe the finance minister should answer it. But I suggest that he told us that he's not going to act on speculations, what might be based on an economic theory. He would like to see the evidence that actually it's hurting us, and then we'll see. That's basically what he said. I think, when you have so many changes at a very short period of time, waiting a year can be costly.
Right.
But that's my opinion. I thought that we should have acted now.
Right.
But the finance minister wants to focus on evidence, and I understand that.
Right. So given cities around the world are being asked to do a lot of things that appears to require, not appears, but requires money, resources, and so on. Federal and provincial governments are strained with respect to resources. What advice would you give cities in terms of how to take action on some of the challenges? And you addressed a few of them. You talk about housing and so on, which is a key problem here in the city of Toronto. Talk about education, which is a key problem. Again, this is a provincial matter. We don't look after education. What advice would you offer to cities in terms of affecting changes other than simply looking at lobbying?
Yes, I know. It's a very difficult situation to be in, but I will say the following, and I feel relatively strongly about it, is that we have to make sure that given the fact that we need money, taxing is not the only solution. For example, the proposal to raise development charges on condos. I really don't think that that's a thing that will help the housing market. The opposite will happen. So I'm a little bit concerned about, okay, let's try to squeeze as much money as we can from the real estate market, which is the golden goose. And I say, let's be careful here because we actually can make the situation worse from a long-term perspective. Same goes for rent control, which I think is not the right policy and actually will make things worse. I totally hear you. It's a very difficult situation. It's a growing city, and we are in a transition period. We are in a transition period in which we have the mismatch. And that's so difficult because you have more and more people kind of falling behind and need the help. And you have the housing market, which is a major issue. And then you have, we are waiting for the transition. And this transition can take 5-6 years. So I totally hear you that it's a very difficult period to be. And I say it has to come from the province. I think that the province has to rethink the way they allocate money, because I think they cannot ask cities to just, with a very limited revenue base, to do all the heavy lifting. And when you do that, it leads to, in my opinion, some suboptimal policies like raising development charges, which I don't think will help.
Thank you very much. Members, we are going to ask you an opportunity to speak, but I know that Mr. Tall has to go, and he can stay if he wishes to hear what you have to say. And with great respect, I know if you left, we wouldn't think that as being a negative at all, that you didn't want to hear what we had to say. But I wanted to, on behalf of members of the committee and the staff and the public who have heard you, thank you very much for this very insightful and enlightening, as well as somewhat frightening analysis of the economy and so on. But I think it's very instrumental and helpful because there are many things that we will take away from this and fits really into some of the work that we're actually doing here already. And clearly we don't have all the answers and so on or solutions, but we are aware, and you have affirmed what some of the challenges are and so on. And there are some opportunities in there as well. It appears to me, though, that there needs to be a lot more collaboration. There's a great gap between some of the business interests and the political interests and so on, and just how we think. And then on another part of the gap that exists is the educational component that we as a society need to address. Probably about 7 years ago, we were in touch with the folks in Germany talking about some of the things that they're doing here, and we wanted to look at how we can extrapolate from that, learn from them, and try to implement some of the practices which are long-standing with respect to how they have done things. We're not there yet. We are very mindful, and I like the point that you made with respect to interests, educational interests. I say to my own son, I know that you like business, but also there's a technical component part that you really should be aware of and should get yourself into. And I know that he is not alone or unique. A lot of our young kids who are in university or colleges and so on, they're doing a lot of things that they like, but as you pointed out rightfully so, it's not necessarily transferred into a marketability aspect in terms of what are the needs. And I think governments need to have more of a role, as well as the business sector, in terms of how we collaborate and create the interest opportunity to engage our young people into interesting aspect of their interest, but at the same time, what are the market requirements so that as a societal interest, we can address some of the challenges and so on. Those are the things that we're trying to work on here as a city, and we need to ensure that there's more collaboration. It is always fascinating and very, very helpful when you come in to give us your analysis. We do look forward to it. We want to thank you, and CIBC continues to be very fortunate to have you on board, because your knowledge and your expertise obviously is very helpful, and not only to us here, but clearly to the economy as a whole. So thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so members, I'd like to then ask Councillor Holland to be the first speaker. Thank you, Councillor Holland.
Great, and thank you so much for that presentation. I did find it insightful as well, and just bringing up a number of topics that we've been finding in the ecosystem as well. So, I mean, it's interesting because in terms of our tech ecosystem, we're doing phenomenally well. So we're punching above our weight. We're doing phenomenally well despite not even having a great branding strategy, but we're going to get that underway. But it's fascinating to see the separation between how well we're doing there, but there is still a need for a certain skill set even within that ecosystem. So we're seeing that many of the companies that are scaling have a need for certain skill sets, and they're going abroad to get those. So even though we have an amazing well of talent here, we have amazing educational institutions, world-renowned, but we have so much talent here, but there's still an absence of certain areas that we need to address. So I think that the federal government should actually have a role in that, and in identifying the need versus what we're producing again in out of our educational system. But I'd also say that there's a lot of countries that are addressing the new innovation economy, and it's either Sweden or Norway. I know that they've completely revamped their primary education to address that. So it's identifying sort of the type of educational system that we have and the skills that we're educating there, and making sure that we're putting a certain type of mindset into our educational system. But again, that's provincial, so we don't have influence there. So I think in looking at these broader aspects, as much as we can lobby, they just don't fall within our purview. But again, we can provide many things within our city that would help elevate that and continue that growth. And I think that we're doing a great job at it. I mean, we're seeing so much in that, at least within that ecosystem, which I would probably say at this point, everything is tech. I mean, if it's not tech, you're probably going to be obsolete within about 5 years. So since tech runs this way, horizontal, I mean, everything is tech. So eventually it will just turn that way. And I just want to thank CIBC for presenting, and I think that it's really fascinating to see other areas where we need to improve. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Holland. Anyone else to speak? Okay, no problem. So just move receipt of the presentation. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Next, members, we actually have a presentation from the General Manager. It's ED, we're on item ED 27.5, City of Toronto's Canada 150 celebration.
We're going to do some videos, I think, is all we're going to do for this.
Oh, that's fine. So I like videos because it's techie.
It is.
No, we're on the annual report this time, and then Canada 150 later.
Okay.
Is that right? So this is just a quick sales pitch for this document, to take a scan of it. From our, work at your direction and council's direction with respect to what the division did in 2017. We've just distributed this document today, just now, fresh off the press. I'm going to run through a couple of things quickly. First of all, I'm going to speak a little bit about Canada 150, but we have a different report on that. If you take a look at that report, you'll see an incredible depth of activities that went on, and then walk through each of the 4 service areas within the division, and then the program support, which ties it all together from the point of view of providing support. So let's talk a little bit about some of the high points from the Canada 150, because all we're going to show when the item comes up is the couple of videos. So we set a record for the number of people that came to Nathan Phillips Square for any event when we opened up the year with the New Year's Eve celebration, 60,000 people. Didn't think it was possible to get that many people in this area, but if you close Bay Street, close Queen Street, and you have people coming in and out, you can get a lot of people here. Lots of events, lots of TV coverage, especially on the New Year's Eve. We benefited somewhat from the problems that Ottawa had with their weather that evening, so we got more national coverage. Momentio, which was a display of important artifacts from Toronto's history that was mobile, moved around. We had My City, My Six words to tell your story about your experience with Toronto. Very inspiring. If you look at them, you read 100 of them, it's unbelievable how people can put so much emotion and heartfelt appreciation for their city into 6 words. And a very important commemoration of the Vimy battle, which for those history buffs in the room will know how important that was for coalescing the Canadian spirit. Unfortunately, in a very heavy loss situation, but a victory for the Canadian Corps that was pulled together just then. I think probably for my mind, the biggest accomplishment was our contact we had on our bridge building we did with the Indigenous peoples, Chief LaForme and many others. Now, while Indigenous communities had trouble with Canada 150 for understandable reasons, for many of those communities, they don't see the last 150 years as being the greatest thing that happened to them. But it's very important that those issues be addressed and full on, and I think we were able to use Canada 150 to actually reach out, and they reached out, and we did a lot of terrific things, and video will highlight some of those. Arts and culture, I'm not going to go through all these numbers, they're in the book, but we continue to reach many, many Torontonians all year long, both in regular programming, special events, Nuit Blanche, over 1 million people. Don't see that very often anywhere in the world. Doors Open, which has been a great May event for everybody and gets to show off the buildings that we don't see very often. In business growth services, investment into the city remains strong. Job growth was not bad, not the best it's been, but not bad last year. Our unemployment rate continues to drop. Mr. Tal described some of the factors of that, an aging population and discouraged workers being the 2 not great reasons. Filming, we set in 16 and we announced at the beginning of 17 a $2 billion level. We don't have the final numbers tallied for 2017. We don't think we'll set a new record this year. Constraint in studio space, which is subject to the last item that just got added to the agenda, is one of the reasons for that. But it's not a disastrous year either. It's a solid year. We had no tent poles, i.e. huge productions, although we have probably the largest TV production going on in Toronto right now in terms of spend. So all in all, a solid year for film and entertainment industries. Museum and Heritage Services, along with Arts and Culture, were the two main focuses for our Canada 150, but in addition to that, we continue to support many of our regular activities. We have a new roadmap driving our museum world, and that is starting to show in terms of the contributions we have in the local communities around our 10 history museums. Program support is vital for all of those 4 areas to work solidly, provides research, policy support, the finance and administration, marketing, and fundraising. And this chart right now shows the significant amount of additional money that we find from sponsors, grants from governments, other governments, to supplement the funding that council provides to us. So those are solid numbers above previous years. That's the presentation on the book. Please take a chance to look at it. If you have any questions about it or would like to know more about it, because it's a very good summary of what the division does, please give me a call. Thanks.
You know, don't move.
Pardon?
Don't move. Stay right there.
Relax.
I'm going to say, just in the interest of certainly time, as the general manager has indicated, that we've just received the document and so on, and there's a lot of information in there. General manager and I have been discussing this matter for some time now. A lot of good information and so on. The general flow is that we would ask questions and so on at this particular point in time. But in view of the fact that you've just received the report, I'd like to suggest that if there are some questions as you read through the document later on, invite the general manager to come into your office and sit down and have a discussion. We can have sort of a process that allows you to be able to have your question answers and so on, just in terms of the interest of time. But this is really good news, and there's a lot of work that's being done to support the additional good news, so that in the 2018 annual report that will come, we will have additional good news and so on. Okay. However, I will allow members an opportunity maybe to speak to the issue and so on if you'd like. So, Councillor Kelly, did you wish to speak, or did you?
Very briefly, the report, I think, summarizes not only the work of the department, but of this committee as well. Right. I'm delighted at the caliber of staff that we have in the various departments. These are first-rate people. They're knowledgeable. They're aggressive, and at the same time, very personable. Frankly, under the leadership of our chair and vice chair, I think that there's been a perfect marriage of the political and civil service components at City Hall. And so I'm delighted to be a member of this committee and to work with these people in the various fields. So thank you very much for what you've done in the past and what you will be doing in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Anyone else wishes to speak? Okay. Just want to thank Mr. Williams and the amazing, talented men and women that Councillor Kelly has just identified in the EDC department. They're just absolutely amazing to work with, and they get it, and they get it done. So thank you all very much, and please extend to all of your respective staff members under your leadership our conveyance of thanks and our sincere appreciation. Look forward to continued working with you all. You're just absolutely amazing. So thank you. Okay, so then move receipt of the General Manager's presentation. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. We will now, members, be moving to ED 27.6, Redefining Public Art in Toronto.
Do I do 5 first?
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. You're right. I'm jumping ahead really fast. Thank you, Councillor Rakadex and Madam Clerk. Number 5, ED 27.5. That's what we just sort of did.
No, we sort of covered that a little bit. We thought we'd show some videos that give you a taste of if you happen to miss any of these events or occasions.
Okay.
You'll get a reminder of it.
So we'll roll that. fantastic. Well done. Any questions? Oh, is there more? There's more, okay. Thought you only had one. More the merrier. Oh, this is a big one. Yeah, yeah. Wow, fantastic. I never get tired of seeing that one. Yeah. So great. Okay, any questions or comments on this? Anybody wishes to speak? We'll just move receipt. We've seen this review as well. Okay, so we're just moving receipt of the presentation. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving right along to, moving ahead to ED 27.6. Redefining public art in Toronto. We have a speaker, Dr. Sarah Diamond, the President and Vice Chancellor of OCAD University is here. Dr. Diamond, you are no stranger to this committee. It is always a pleasure to have you here. You may begin. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much. And it's so hard to not jump into the presentation on the Toronto economy and post-secondary education, but I will restrain myself. So I'm here because I had the pleasure of co-authoring a report with a group of researchers from OCAD University and the University of Toronto that was really looking at the incredible work that's happened in the city in investment in public art. So the report came from really a position of strength. It was motivated by conversations with the developer community, with the art community, my role as chair of Nuit Blanche's advisory council, and a sense that we should really kind of take a snapshot of where we are right now, what public art does for this city, and look at it in the context of other urban centers. And we used a mixed method approach. We used natural language processing, which in fact is AI, to look at a huge number of documents and policies from cities around the world with more than 1 million population with strong public art. We interviewed folks, and we did a comparative study with Montreal. And what we found is that Toronto is really poised to be a leader in public art, but our investment and overall initiative and policy is lagging vis-a-vis peer cities. And we know that public art actually helps to strengthen communities and build identity and coheed diversity, but it also is a really important investment in the quality of life and the actual value of the public realm and of real estate. So there's both economic and social and creative cultural benefits from it. So in this study that we undertook, and we've had some really great conversations with economic development and culture and planning, who are very aware of this study, we were able to identify a series of gaps in this city There's no citywide public master plan. There are public art deserts outside of intensive development zones, and I have to say that, we're very excited that Nuit Blanche is going to be both in the Toronto core but also in Scarborough. And I think it marks really one of the really core findings of the report, which is we need to look at how to ensure that public art is present not only in the downtown core with all of the developer investment, but really throughout the city of Toronto with all of its benefits. There's few sites where it's aggregated into larger or interconnected projects. We need some revision of policies and bylaws. They're somewhat antiquated and cumbersome. And we don't mandate our city's infrastructure plans and budgets in terms of investment in public art. And the guidelines of what public art is don't keep up with best practices and emerging global practices in a global city. And we also, frankly, could find other sources of funding, including from the private sector. So we have a series of recommendations. One is to really renew the vision and commitment to public art in this wonderful city, redefine it, place it everywhere, and use the tools and vehicles to do that. Let's simplify our processes. Hi, everybody. What a pleasure to have all these students come in as a university president speaking. Build new collaborations. So other cities have great collaborations with the university sector, with public art galleries and museums who hold art that can be leased or placed in the public realm. And let's look at how we can promote public art. So as we were doing our study, Elena Altman also did a really wonderful piece of work, which we worked very closely side by side, that actually looked at all of the public art that has been created in Toronto in the last 40 years and developed an amazing map of those resources, how each piece was funded, what it was, what medium, how it impacted communities. So we have that history. We have these proposals for policies, and we want to see public art really integrated in future funding. So what are we suggesting? Well, this is a report that was created outside of the context of the city. We didn't ask you to invest in it. We thought a strong third-party piece of research with lots of support from foundations and different communities would really provide you with the tools with which to really look at public art. So we're hoping that now you will undertake the review, that the talent at the city will look at the recommendations in a timely manner in 2018. We think after Nuit Blanche is in Scarborough, many communities will be saying, we want public art here. Now help us get it. So those are my comments. Thank you very much for hearing my suggestions, and I'm happy to speak to any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diamond. Members, we have a number of members who have questions for you. We'll start with Councillor Hart to begin. Councillor Hart, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you for that. Can you tell me what your priorities would be?
Well, that's a wonderful question. So part of what we'd like to see really is to develop really a public art plan, and we know that will take some time. That will look at how we can really further investment throughout the city of Toronto, and Chicago has done that, and they've looked at the 50 wards in Chicago and how to create a number of initiatives, not all of which are costly, that really brings this kind of power of community mobilization through public art, both temporary and more permanent works throughout the city. So a plan is very important. We also have proposed that we've got excellent people working in economic development and culture, great people in planning, bring them together in a way that there's more coherence and more collaboration together. We think that, at this sort of front end, we can do some redefinition of what we think of as public art in the city. In reality, about 40% of current public art are in murals, work that in fact mobilizes communities. 60% is more permanent. We could shift that balance. So there's really an opportunity to have more public art that's somewhat less expensive, more integrated throughout the city. And then another piece of it is to really look at how to aggregate the dollars. So this is one of the weaknesses in the city, is that we don't have an effective way of taking developer investment, city investment, pooling it, and creating the kind of fantastic impacts that we are seeing at the Bentway, at the waterfront, and that we actually could look at in terms of designating areas in various wards, where you'd have that power of convening public and art and really building community. So those would be some of the proposals. We have a lot of ideas for other sources of money, by the way. And we're working with Partners in Art, who are a wonderful group, who are private citizens who invest in art in the city. They've made public art their priority this year. So they're really excited at working with us, working with the city to say, you know, what are the kind of vehicles that other municipalities have created to really create capacity in this context? I hope that was helpful.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hart. Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Question, please.
In the recommendation that we have before us from Councillor Cressy, the report is to be reviewed from the perspective of feasibility.
Yeah.
And how are you defining feasibility? What does that mean?
It's a great word. You know, feasibility is taking the recommendations that have you know, a lot of strong research behind them. So these are all about best practices in here that we want to continue, and from other cities that we want Toronto to consider, and saying, how do we agree with these? Does the city agree with these? And then how can we, in fact, roll them out? So what would they cost? What would be required in terms of, for example, better cooperation, you know, to be able to create these consolidated funds and looking at public art districts. So feasibility is both, do we agree with them, and then also how would we realize them? So one of the things we talk about, and very simple mechanisms to make sure that public art is maintained when it's commissioned by a condominium. And some of it is just sort of practical measures that the city can adopt that will make it simpler both to have public art present and also to sustain and maintain once it's built.
Isn't there something in the stipulation in the city bylaws that 1% of the capital costs of building something in the city has to go to public art?
Well, that's the thing, is the Section 37 currently is for developers, and it gives them an option of investing 1% in public art. Our recommendation, and it would be a change of practice, is that, like other cities in Canada and many in other countries, that become a requirement, that money could either be invested on site or it could be pooled. So it would be look at that. And the second is that the City of Toronto has not consistently used its 1%. That is attached to public buildings and infrastructure that the city, in fact, invests in, all of the 5 areas of the city. So parks, for example. If you look at Ottawa, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, which are smaller cities, Montreal, with way less cultural practice. I mean, Montreal is a good competitor, but nowhere near, frankly, to Toronto and the capacity of our cultural communities. They require, when city infrastructure is built, that 1% go to public art. So, you know, that would be a decision the city could make, and it would really help to position us. Another recommendation, which, again, feasibility, many cities use public art as one of their major tourism draws. We don't do this in this city. You know, we could take the work that Alana Altman did, build a really wonderful interactive map, and use that as part of our attractions when we're, you know, selling the visual art scene in Toronto, which, by the way, is one of the most dynamic in this country and now internationally, with the MoCA opening up, our gallery. We've got a gravitas around visual art in this city, and our public art holdings should be part of what builds that, and it's actually an economic asset. So, you know, when we talk about feasibility, it's like, let's look at some of these recommendations that aren't costly, but would in fact make public art one of our attractors, with a revenue that would come back both directly and indirectly to the city.
Maybe I misread the the recommendation, but it would appear that many of the people who are going to be reviewing the report were present when the report was researched and written. And I was wondering if some of the people that would be tasked with reviewing the report might be people that were outside the box and be able to give, you know, a fresh or an alternate
Yes.
interpretation of the data?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor. What we are hoping is that the city creates a working group to work with it on the reviews. So it is working with you know, members of economic development and culture who are tasked with public art, and planning who are tasked with public art, but they also use the resource of the researchers and others potentially who sit on a committee. So I agree with your logic completely. Look at the data, look at the research, and then say this is what we feel would be the best way for the city to follow through on these recommendations.
Okay.
And the
Thank you
report
very much.
backstage date?
That's probably not in 2019. So we'll address that with the general manager, but that's
We're
a good
hoping
question.
2018, but
It's not going to happen. 2019 is going to happen. Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly, with respect to your questions. And we will address a little bit further on the date of the report coming back. I did talk to the general manager, and we've looked at the fact that there's an election coming up and so on. And when we break, it would not be sufficient time in order to address the report and to deal with this with sufficient information. So
okay.
we will do our best.
Understood, as long as we get our process.
We will be moving forward with respect
Okay,
to the process.
excellent.
Okay, just before I go to Councillor Frakadakis, I'd like to just take a moment to introduce a group of visitors who are here with us this morning, and they are amazingly wonderful-looking young people from Hamilton. Welcome to Toronto. You're part of, as I understand, Councillor Matthew Green's group. It's the project with the Hamilton Centre for Civic Inclusion, HCCI, and there are 50 young people from Hamilton that are here. I hope you all came with your passports, because if you don't have passports, you won't be going back home. You'll be staying here in Toronto because you're amazing, and we do need more young people in Toronto and so on. I understand that you are here under the tutelage of Sarah Jama, I believe, is here. I don't know if she's in the room, but also Councillor Nathan Shan is also supervising the group here at City Hall. Welcome to Toronto. Welcome to Toronto City Hall. Welcome to the Economic Development Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Michael Thompson. I'm here with the members of committee, Councillor Hart to my far left, Councillor Kelly, immediately following Councillor Hart, Councillor and Vice Chair Holland thereafter. And next to me is the General Manager of Economic Development. He does all the work. We get all the praise. You need to make sure you figure that out as you move forward. Again, I'm Councillor Thompson. These are members of the clerk team who are the ones who do a lot of the work in terms of recording the minutes and so on. And also we have to my far right, Councillor Mayor Frakadakis, who is a member of the committee, and also we have staff members who are here. So I hope you learn a lot here today. I understand you're going also to Queen's Park and to enjoy, obviously, the process and the activities and so on. And you are witnessing an esteemed member of our community, the president of OCAD. So for those of you who may be considering OCAD, Dr. Sarah Diamond, who is the principal and vice chair, is here presenting on arts and culture in terms of how we focus and collaboration between economic development, the economy, and culture, and how we use culture to drive the economy in the city of Toronto. So thank you very much, as well as a thank you to all the people who are your chaperones and the leaders and the community workers who have brought you here to Toronto. We hope that you have an amazing day here at City Hall and Queen's Park. Wish you great success in your scholastic and your academic career, and then in your professional career. So thank you very much. And thank you to Councillor Matthew Green, my colleague from Hamilton, in order to spearheading this. And thank you for Councillor Shan in terms of ensuring that the group were here today. So enjoy your stay here in the city, and you're welcome to continue to stay if you wish. And we will now continue with respect to our meeting. So thank you very much for being here. Councilor Rakadakis, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to follow up on Councillor Kelly's questions to you, Sarah, with respect to the option for developers for the 1%. So I know in the United States, and I'm not sure what the percentage is in places like Chicago or New York, but they do have it mandated that there is a percentage. I mean, I would think it's the 1% for the 99%, and their public art plans there. And so I'm wondering if what you're proposing is something along those lines, so that maybe we could also see Picassos on the streets of Toronto.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say, as the students are leaving, OKDU's in the midst of negotiating a memorandum of understanding with Councillor Green to collaborate with them. So it was very timely for them to emerge, just as we're literally looking at that. No, that's a really wonderful question, and as we looked at 38 cities and their different practices and policies, we found that really in most cities it is a mandatory 1% or 2%. So it can be up to 2% in some areas, and other cities also have the capacity to pool that resource. So that you're not only looking at, and that does happen to some extent here. So on the waterfront, a number of the developers got together and said, we're going to pool our resource and we're going to build, a public art park. But the ability to pool the resource, to also, if developers don't want to see the sculpture or the work on their site, to give it to the city to be able to efficiently manage and place public art in other locations.
So, I mean, you're talking about only private developers. I mean, what about a mandate that actually ensures that the city?
Oh, that's what we're saying. Absolutely. So absolutely. So
I think in Chicago it's over 1%.
Yeah, you've got it. You've got it. So we are saying that. We're saying that, and we heard that. So we interviewed quite a few people from very different walks of life around this question. We looked at best practices in other cities. We looked at the history of public art practice in Toronto, and at one point in time, the 1% for the city was mandatory. After amalgamation, it wasn't. So we're saying bring that back. Because you have to think of public art as a sort of economic stimulus as well. It creates work for artists, for architects, for the people who build the work. Increasingly, we're seeing work that uses a digital dimension and can be used, in fact, to show the kind of innovation environment in a city. Montreal does that, San Jose does that. So it really helps actually as an economic stimulus. It's not like a burden on the city to do that, although it is money, right? Because it plays back by creating work that has benefit to it.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Diamond and Councillor Rakadakis. Just one question for me. If you were to look at a city around the world that exemplifies this concept of having arts and cultural elements throughout the city, is there one city that comes to mind? And I know you talked a little bit about Chicago, but beyond Chicago, what would you say?
Sydney, Australia. I mean, Sydney's done a lot of work there, but Sydney's also at a moment, because I'm involved with the Smart Cities Working Group with the city as well, and we had the folks come in from Sydney. They're a very divided city, so they're now looking at how they take the kind of investment, in a region that is relatively had a lot of development and transportation investment, and move it across the river, so to speak. Sydney is a great example. Ottawa has just passed excellent policy, and Calgary is doing some fantastic work in terms of city investment in public art. David Rokeby, who's one of our alumni and a really very famous Toronto-based artist, has done this phenomenal piece which reworks the entire rail underpass in Calgary with a very close working relationship with the City of Calgary and engineering and architects and designers there. So we certainly have the opportunity to do that kind of work here. We're a wealthy city.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I think we've talked about our challenges, but this is a great way of sort of spreading the wealth, and we've got a lot of infrastructure development happening here.
Okay.
I just want to say that, you know, everybody we met with in the developer community, including Build, who we interviewed, was extremely positive about continuing to see investment in public art. And some of the developers, and I won't go through the list of them, they've got really very radical, exciting ideas about, you know, how to strengthen public art presence in the city of Toronto.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Dahman. Good. Members, is anyone wishing to speak? Okay. Councillor Frakadakis? Just before you speak, maybe I'll just do this. I did ask the general manager if he wanted to answer any questions that you may have or members may have, and or whether or not he wanted to make a comment on this particular item just before you speak. So any questions for the general manager? No? Okay. Mr. General Manager, did you want to just comment and then I'll get members to speak?
Thank you. Just to, first of all, thank OCADU and U of T for the work they did. They did a lot. City staff were involved in consulting, as Councillor Ford has already.
Kelly.
Councillor Kelly mentioned. No,
It's been a long day.
I apologize. So there's a lot of staff were involved. I went to a couple of public meetings. So it was very collaborative, broadly based, done in a very positive spirit and working with the city, but it had the great advantage, I think, of being independent, being able to form their own views from it. I'll make a couple of comments. I'm going to ask Patrick if he has anything to add in a minute. We talked, Sarah's talked about the big areas within the city are this division and planning, but there are other areas. And within this division even, we have the BIA office that gets involved in public art. We have our own public art group that basically takes care of investment that's created because of money generated by the city's investment in infrastructure or buildings. Planning does the work when a private sector builder is looking for approvals and is given an opportunity to put some money into public art. But there's also Waterfront Toronto that Sarah mentioned. There's Evergreen that's been doing some work down the Don River. The TDC does some work in their transit vehicles. So there's a lot of fractured, non-coordinated, and non-accumulated energy that's expended here. And I agree with the report that says that we are missing some opportunities for a lot. And we don't, there's no single source where you can go and find out, you know, I mean, we have some very famous artists doing some work. I wanted to use an example. I can't remember the artist that has the sculpture outside of the now Ritz-Carlton. It was there before the Ritz-Carlton was built. Yeah. But it's three-dimensional art that is phenomenal by one of a very famous sculpture artist, so famous I can't remember his name.
Yeah, and we have Douglas Copeland's. I mean, we have a panoply of international public art here. That's amazing already, right?
So, so I think the report is going to galvanize city attention towards it. I've committed to the chair that staff will do this work in 2018. Looking at Pat, hoping he's not shooting me. And that our first opportunity, though, to report back officially won't occur until either the budget process or the new committees in 2019. Pat, did you want to add anything to what I just said?
No, that was a great summary. Perhaps a few quick points for the benefit of committee. The outside the core piece will be critical. We've just gone to tender for a study about best practices in art animation outside the core. The city's street art program run by transportation is very popular, and its community engagement and connection to BIAs is something I think we can learn from, so we'll be doing that. The other side as well, to Councillor Holland's comments, to Sarah Diamond's comments as well, there is a great opportunity to look at the innovation economy here to help public engage with public art. We'll be working with Arts Etobicoke as one example, where there are a series of murals in Islington which speak to the history of the community, but perhaps not the diversity of the community today. As opposed to replacing that public art, we're working with an augmented reality application that will allow the viewer to walk forward in time to see successive waves of immigration and how that community has evolved over time. So there are great opportunities at the interface of the public experience to work with Toronto's high-tech sector too.
Fabulous. That's great.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Frakadakis, you wanted to speak?
Yes, I was going to move the recommendations in Councillor Cressy's letter and just say how excited I am by the possibility of actually having more public art in our streets that's accessible to all people, because we actually do represent a wide spectrum of residents, some vulnerable and some more affluent, and so I think that not everybody has an opportunity to be able to afford to go to the Art Gallery of Ontario or the Royal Ontario Museum or whatever gallery it is, or perhaps they don't have the opportunity to travel to see some of the great artists in the world, and so I think this is a wonderful opportunity to make that more accessible to everyday people. So I see this, like I said, as the 1% for the 99%.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Councillor Holland?
Great, thank you so much. And Sarah, thanks so much for coming as usual. It's a great, I think, a great report and opportunity. And I've been over to OCAD and seen the amazing work that's taking place there, which is even just beyond the art, but the tech as well and the intertwining within that. So I'll be really excited to see how we can unite both across the city. There's so much opportunity, and there's so many organizations and tech companies that want to get involved. So that's where I'll see a really great intersect, even public-private partnerships in there of those that really want to get involved. So there's a lot of people stepping up to the plate and want to see that creativity right across the city. So
Yeah,
thank you.
if I can respond to you.
No, sorry.
Oh, I'm not allowed to?
Not allowed.
Thank you. You talk offline,
Yeah.
please. Okay, anyone else to speak? Okay, great. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Diamond.
Thank you.
All right, so members, we have basically 2 items left. And 2 being the fact that on item 5, I just wanted to reconsider, I just need to reopen that for a moment and to then adopt the recommendations that are actually in the report, okay? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So move adoption of ED 27.5. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right. So we have this particular item with respect to, there's an attachment as well, letter, communication from Councillor Fletcher. And there's a motion that I'm going to move, and it is as a result of the communication from Councillor Fletcher. Is there any questions on this particular item? Anyone is unclear as to what is actually being done? We've had a moment to review it and so on. Okay, are we good with it? Oh, right, exactly. I think we're all aware of it. I mean, this is really to ensure that as we move to develop the Portlands as such and the work that's going on there, that there's going to be collaboration in terms of consideration in terms of how we build that out. There will be a residential component as part of it, but also the film piece to protect this very vital industry. Councillor Fletcher wants to be very clear, as well as members of the Film Board, as do we as chair and members of the Economic Development Committee and Council as a whole, and the Mayor as well is rather supportive of this in terms of moving forward. So we want to get the staff to address the report, the Film Studio Infrastructure Report by N. Barry Lyons Consultant, to get our staff to work on that. And so this is really what's being asked, and I think it's pretty clear. The General Manager and I have had some discussion. He and his team are prepared to advance this work, and so we are now giving instruction to that be done. So all those in favor? Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, this is the amendment here to, this comes out of Councillor Fletcher's letter. So all those in favor of this amendment? Opposed? Carried? And item as amended, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you, and I think we're good. So, members, may I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Kelly, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and we're done. Thank you to the clerks and the staff. Thank you.